All right, let's jump into this deep dive. We're going to be looking at a talk titled Two Great Commandments.
Okay.
It was delivered back in 2019 by Dallin H. Oaks,
Right.
who, as you probably know, is the first counselor in the first presidency of
Yeah.
the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Mm-hmm.
And this talk, well, kind of tackles a sensitive subject,
For sure.
how to balance like those really deeply held religious beliefs
Yeah.
with showing love and understanding towards everyone,
Yeah.
especially towards the LGBTQ plus community.
It's a tough one. It's one that's being discussed a lot right now.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and Oakes kind of gets right into it,
Yeah.
He sets the stage by emphasizing the two greatest commandments,
Right.
loving God and loving your neighbor. And
Which, as anyone who has, tried to actually live their life knows,
Yeah.
those two things can sometimes be a little tricky to reconcile.
yeah, it's like you're always trying to find that balance.
Yeah.
Where does your faith meet compassion? And how do you,
Yeah.
there's that sweet spot.
Where's that sweet spot exactly?
Yeah.
And that's precisely where Oakes takes us in this talk. His main argument is that really, truly loving God means adhering to his commandments.
Okay.
And specifically, he hones in on the commandments related to marriage and chastity.
Right.
And he links them directly to the highest blessings that we can receive, including eternal life.
That was one of the parts that when I was reading it kind of, I don't know, just really struck me.
Yeah.
That whole section about God's laws.
Mhm.
Because the way he frames it is that they're rooted in love. And they're meant to guide us,
Right.
to reach our full potential.
That's a really key point, and it sets the stage for a deeper dive into how this talk views marriage and eternal life.
Okay.
Oakes makes a really fascinating connection between eternal life and what he calls creative powers
Okay.
that are inherent in the union of a man and woman.
Right.
And he's saying that this makes heterosexual marriage essential in God's plan.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
So this concept of creative powers, it's like the key, right? Because he ties that directly to the concept of eternal life.
Right.
And that makes heterosexual marriage like the very center of that whole framework.
Right.
But what about those who don't fit into this model? For whatever reason,
Yeah.
What does that mean for their path to eternal life?
That's a big question. And it's a question that Oakes does address. He doesn't shy away from it. He jumps right into this complexity, and he says that you're supposed to hold fast to your doctrinal beliefs about marriage and chastity.
Right. But at the same time,
You're also called to show understanding and love toward those who make different choices.
okay.
It's not about condoning, actions that go against what you believe in,
Right.
but it's about offering support without judgment.
Okay, so how does that actually look, though? How do you walk that fine line between law and love?
Well, Oakes gives some specific examples. He talks about the importance of avoiding premature labeling of children
Oh, yeah.
regarding sexual orientation.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, and it really struck me as insightful
Yeah.
because it's like he's acknowledging the fact that identity can be fluid,
Yeah.
especially in those formative years,
absolutely.
And it's not about pushing labels,
Right.
but allowing each individual the space to discover who they are.
Yeah, and to figure that out at their own pace.
Exactly. And along with that, he really emphasizes the need for civility and respect, even in the face of disagreement.
Yes.
He even specifically says we should respect those who enter into same-sex marriages,
Right.
even though it's not something that the church doctrinally supports.
Yeah, that's a big statement considering how much debate there is.
It is a big statement.
Yeah.
And, he's saying that you can disagree with somebody,
Yes.
but you can still respect them as a human being.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that can be a hard thing for people,
It is.
to wrap their minds around that idea.
Yeah,
And especially with this topic,
Right.
it's something that people feel very, very strongly about.
absolutely. And, it's interesting how he addresses women specifically in this context.
Oh, yeah.
He brings up this prophecy by Spencer W. Kimball
Mm-hmm.
that predicts that women are going to play a crucial role in the church's growth.
Yeah, I remember that part.
Yeah, he's calling on women to be righteous examples.
Yes.
And to really help bring others to the church.
Especially those who he describes as being influenced by worldly priorities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's placing a huge emphasis on the influence of women,
Yeah.
especially in navigating all of these really complex social issues that we're facing.
And the way that he's saying it is almost like this call to action.
It is.
He's saying, women, you need to step up and be this guiding force.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, how do you think that message lands with women in the church today?
That's a good question. I think it's a mixed bag.
Mm.
Some women, I think, feel very inspired by it and
Yeah.
feel ready to answer that call. But then you have others who maybe feel a little bit burdened by that.
Like it's too much pressure.
Like it's too much. Or like they're being tasked with fixing a problem.
Yeah.
That's not really their fault.
Right, right.
So it's a very nuanced message, and I think it sparks a lot of different reactions.
But either way, it highlights the important role that women play.
Absolutely.
Not just in the church.
Not just in the church, yeah.
But in society as a whole.
Right, yeah.
In navigating all of this.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting how this call to action for women kind of intersects with Oakes's message about balancing law and love.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he's saying, okay, yeah, we hold fast to these beliefs, but we also extend compassion and understanding. And women, you have a special role in bridging that gap.
It's a tough job, right?
It is.
Like he's asking them to be, I don't know, like beacons of faith, but also ambassadors of empathy.
Exactly. And that kind of leads us to another important part of this talk, where Oakes acknowledges that, everyone faces different challenges.
Right. That's something we can all relate to. No matter what you believe or what choices you make, life is hard.
Life is hard, and it throws curveballs.
Yeah.
And he says that, the reasons for those challenges, they might remain a mystery.
Yeah.
But God will help us overcome them.
If we just ask for his help, right?
If we sincerely seek his help, yeah.
It's a really nice message of hope and resilience.
Yeah.
It reminds us that we're not alone in this.
We're not alone. And,
Yeah.
And it goes back to that idea of personal accountability.
Right. We're responsible for the choices that we make.
Exactly.
But we're also promised help and guidance if we turn to God.
Yeah, it's that balance between our own choices and that divine grace.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And this idea of accountability, it leads right into the discussion of judgment.
Okay.
Oakes emphasizes that the final judgment, it's going to be by the Lord.
Right.
And only he has the knowledge and the wisdom to judge us fairly.
That's a really powerful concept.
It is, especially in the context of this whole conversation.
Yeah.
It's so easy to judge other people.
Yeah, especially when you don't agree with their choices.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Oakes is reminding us that it's not our place to do that.
Right. Like we need to be humble.
We need to be humble.
We need to recognize that we don't know everything.
We don't know everything, and we don't know the whole story behind someone's choices or the burdens that they're carrying.
So basically, we need to have a little more compassion.
Absolutely, yeah.
And let God be the judge.
Let God be the judge, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
And, it's interesting how Oakes frames this whole talk in the context of, like, all the changes happening in society.
Yeah.
He acknowledges the legalization of same-sex marriage, for example,
Uh-huh.
while still saying,
Right.
the church's stance is for marriage between a man and a woman.
So it's like, okay, yeah, the world's changing.
The world is changing, but our beliefs are not.
Our beliefs are staying the same.
Yeah.
So how do you do that, though?
It's a hard question.
Yeah, like
and it's a dilemma that a lot of people of faith are struggling with right now.
How do you balance those personal beliefs with, these evolving societal norms, especially when they're at odds with each other?
It's a hard one. And Arndt doesn't really offer any easy answers.
Right.
But he encourages people to think it through.
To really reflect on it.
To reflect, to pray about it.
Okay.
So
basically figure it out.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
He says you have to wrestle with these issues.
Yeah.
Seek guidance and find your own
path.
Your own path. Yeah.
Because it's not a one-size-fits-all.
It's not a one-size-fits-all, exactly.
Okay, and then he also talks about, like, the potential for misunderstandings. And...
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
Yeah.
He points out that the church encourages love and respect for all individuals. But that doesn't mean that they condone actions that go against their teachings.
Right. So it's not like they're saying...
Exactly. It's not like, oh, we accept everyone, so we accept everything.
Right. It's not a free-for-all.
Yeah.
He's drawing a distinction between loving the individual and endorsing their choices.
Which I think is a really important distinction.
It is, and it's one that I think gets lost a lot.
Absolutely.
Because then people say, oh, you're a hypocrite.
Right, exactly.
But he's really trying to clarify that.
Yeah, and I think that's a...
And he acknowledges that it's a hard concept to grasp.
Yeah, it is a tough one.
It is, for people both inside and outside of the church.
And it kind of goes back to that fine line.
It does, yeah.
How do you balance those two things?
Yeah, and Oakes really emphasizes the importance of prayer and... seeking divine guidance.
Right, because we need all the help we can get.
We do, yeah. We need to turn to our faith
Yeah.
for strength and direction, especially when
Yeah.
we're faced with those really hard decisions. Yeah, and then there's that whole concept of spiritual maturity,
Yeah.
which basically means that as we understand the gospel more, we become more compassionate
Right.
and empathetic.
It's not just about following the rules.
Yeah.
It's about developing a heart that is firm in its beliefs,
Yeah.
but also open to understanding other people.
Even if they don't believe the same things as you.
Exactly.
And so ultimately, it's about trying to be more like Christ,
Yeah.
who loves everyone unconditionally,
Mm-hmm.
but is also unwavering in his commitment to the truth,
Exactly.
which I think for most of us is something we're always working on.
It is. It's a process.
It's a process.
Of constantly growing and evolving.
And trying to be better.
And trying to be better, yeah.
It's funny, we keep coming back to that whole walking a fine line thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what this whole talk is about.
It is, yeah.
This balancing act, between like staying true to your convictions,
Right.
but also having compassion for everyone.
It's about living out your faith.
Yeah, in a really complicated world.
In the real world.
Yeah.
Where things aren't black and white.
Right, where it's not just about following the rules perfectly.
It's about navigating those messy situations.
Yeah, and doing it with,
Yeah.
wisdom and grace.
With grace and wisdom, exactly.
And I think this all goes back to
It does, yeah.
there's two great commandments.
Loving God and loving your neighbor.
It sounds so simple, right?
It does.
But
Well,
it's so hard to do.
It's hard to put into practice.
Especially when you're faced with those situations where people's beliefs and choices are just clashing.
It is a journey,
Yeah.
a constant journey.
Well, I feel like I've learned a lot.
Oh, good.
I'm glad. Yeah. This has been a really helpful discussion.
It's been a good one.
And it's made me think about all this in a new way.
I think it's particularly relevant for you,
Yeah.
given your interest in specific aspect of the listener's interest related to the topic.
Yeah, for sure.
It's one thing to talk about these things in theory,
Hmm.
but this talk really brings it down to a personal level.
Right. It's like, how do I actually live this?
Exactly. How do you live out these principles
Yeah.
in your relationships, in your everyday life?
Right. And the choices that I make.
Exactly. And the choices you make.
So it's not just theology. It's like my life.
It's about your life
Yeah.
and how you apply these teachings.
Okay. So this talk was obviously given to members of the church.
Right.
But do you think there are things in here that...
Absolutely. That
Like,
anyone
okay.
could take away. Absolutely. Yeah. I think anyone who's ever,
Mhm.
had to balance their own beliefs
Yeah.
with respecting people who believe differently.
Yeah, that's everyone, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
It's about finding that common ground,
right.
that shared humanity,
Even when you disagree.
even when you disagree. Yeah.
So it's possible to disagree
If-
without being like a jerk about it.
without being a jerk, exactly.
Okay, good.
And I think that's something we need more of these days.
We do, for
Yeah.
sure.
With all the polarization and division,
Yeah, it's like everyone's yelling at each other.
it is. And
But
so,
no one's listening.
and no one's listening. Exactly.
So we need to be more humble,
More humble, yeah.
more willing to
To
listen,
be willing to listen,
even if we don't agree.
even if you don't agree.
Because that's how we learn, right?
That's how we learn and that's how we grow.
So to our listener, as you're thinking about all of this, and
Yeah.
you're faced with these situations where
Yeah.
beliefs and choices are colliding,
It's going to happen. Yeah.
how are you going to balance
Mm-hmm.
law and love in your own life?
It's a good question to think about.
It is.
It's a challenge, but it's a good one.
Because that's where we find that balance
Yeah.
between what we believe
Between your convictions
and how we treat people,
and your compassion.
and that's what really matters.
That's what matters.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning,
Keep diving deep.
and we'll see you then.